Hello, my name is Andrew Gary, and welcome to Seismic Sound-Off, in-depth conversations in applied geophysics. In this episode, I speak with Josef Paffenholz as he discusses the next trillion-dollar business and how the SEG Advanced Modeling Corporation initiative, or SEAM, could play an essential role in its creation. In this exciting conversation, Josef highlights why the oil and gas sector represents the best source to tackle industrial-scale carbon storage, why he believes it's dangerous to leak carbon storage to the oil price, and how advanced simulations like SEAM could ignite this trillion-dollar business. This episode is sponsored by TGS. TGS offers a wide range of energy data and insights to meet the industry where it's at and where it's headed. TGS provides scientific data and intelligence to companies active in the energy sector. In addition to a global, extensive, and diverse energy data library, TGS offers specialized services such as advanced processing and analytics alongside cloud-based data applications and solutions. To learn more about SEAM and to read Josef's article in The Leading Edge, visit seg.org/podcast. Now for our conversation. Well, this is an exciting time for SEAM and just talking about carbon capture and sequestration. So we're happy to have you here, Josef. Let's kind of start there. Why is carbon capture and sequestration important to achieving the climate goal that has been set out by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change?
The carbon capture sequestration has, since the 2018 report, an integral part of the models. And doing the calculation, it came out without sequestration and storage of CO2. The goal to reach the 2-degree target would be 128% larger. The cost would be 138% higher. And even that, it seems, if you look at the calculation, the assumption in that calculation about energy efficiency gains and the buildup of renewable energy, it seems fairly optimistic. So I think that the need for storage might be even higher than indicated in the panel. And indicated in the panel, we have about 500 gigaton, which is to be stored, at least 500 gigatons to be stored until 2100. I mean, 80% of the energy so far still worldwide comes still from oil and gas and coal. And that needs to be ramped down. But for the foreseeable future, the next decades, we still will have need oil production. So the oil production need to be as efficient as possible, and in terms of CO2. But also we need to get rid of the CO2 in the air and capture CO2. So that's why, and we need to do it in massive amounts. 500 gigatons, that's about 10 gigatons a year, what we need to store. And that is a huge increase in what we do so far in the last 20 years of storage test sites.
So part of this, is the capturing the carbon, and the next part is sequestration, the storage part. Could you give us a sense of how much space in the Earth would be needed to store the required carbon to achieve these net zero emissions?
So for 500 gigatons of CO2 to store those in the Earth, 300 Kelvin and atmospheric pressure, 1 metric ton of CO2 occupies a cube with side lengths of 8.2 meters. So 800 gigatons would occupy then a cube which has side lengths of 65 kilometers. So 100 meter thick reservoir with 10% porosity would then have to have an extent of 5,300 kilometers by 5,300 kilometers. So that looks pretty grim. However, CO2 can be collapsed by a factor of 300 to 400 if you have it under pressure, like 800 meters or deeper in the Earth. The pressure is so high that it becomes what's called a supercritical state. And in this case, 500 gigatons has a volume that it can be stored in 2,000 sites each 6 by 6 kilometer wide. So this is hardly trivial, but it's not impossible either.
Yeah, that was a nice addition in the article about why carbon, as you mentioned in that answer, is kind of particularly well suited to being stored. And another thing that I didn't really know until reading your article, there are some limitations to enhanced oil recovery, which also at the end does store some carbon as well. Could you just share briefly what are some of the limitations that these enhanced oil recovery operations have in progressing as well towards these net zero emissions?
That is, I think, is an important question, and we are not right now discussing with people in the SEG who are interested in this, talk about these topics. Enhanced oil recovery, there is no doubt that it is more efficient in terms of CO2 produced than conventional oil production. So in that sense, it should be encouraged and should be done as much as possible. Right now, 80%, okay, those numbers are a little bit older. I don't know the very newest numbers in 2020, but in 10 years ago, it was 80% of the CO2 used in enhanced oil recovery was CO2 not from anthropogenic sources, but from subsurface sources. So they pump it out and use it for recovery. That, of course, is not what we are talking about here. We are talking about CO2 from power plants, for example. So it is more efficient, but it is not really enough. Most of the EOR projects, they are early in these stages, the early years of a project, they are carbon negative, but then become carbon positive, meaning they put out altogether more CO2 than it's put into the earth. There can be, if you do the correct reservoir engineering and gear it towards storage instead of the cheapest oil production, then in many projects you could make it a storage project. And that's all good and nice as far it goes. But in terms of the gigaton scale, so we talked about we need 2,000 sites. Right now we have the largest sites which produce 95% of the oil worldwide, that are 1,500 sites. So we're talking about 1,500, 2,000 sites to store CO2. And that cannot be done with EOR. We cannot make CO2 storage, I think, dependent on oil production. Then there's the issue of oil price connecting with CO2. It's complicated enough, but making CO2 storage, the gigaton storage we need to do dependent on the oil price, I think is not the right way to go. The Parish project here in Houston, they have $1 billion investment, CO2 capture on the coal power plant. And it was shut down when the oil price for the receiving EOR project shut down because of the oil price. And I spoke with a representative of the electrical company. They said, no, we are not interested anymore in EOR projects because the financials are just too risky. But for the planning, for the gigaton scale storage, what we need to do, we need to learn how to bring a storage site online every week. And the economic opportunities, if you store 100 gigaton and you get, let's say, $10 for megaton stores, that's $1 trillion business. So that's why I think the industry as a whole and the professional societies, SEG, ALPG, and SCP, they should be working towards to develop this $1 trillion business, it seems to me. And the implications for job creation for the members of the professional societies. I mean, if you have developed a storage site every week, I mean, yeah, in $1 trillion business, they are implied and they are fairly significant, I should say.
Yeah, I would think that is pretty enticing there. And you're talking about disconnecting maybe a little bit of oil and the carbon sequestration in something like EOR. But, given that, why still do you think the oil and gas sector is the best place really to tackle this industrial scale carbon storage?
That it has to be the oil industry, of course, the public perception is not the best. And that if I can quickly could go back to the previous question, why linking EOR in the public eye to sequestration, I think will not work out. If the oil industry tells the public, oh, we have a solution to the climate crisis, oh, please do tell, what is it? Oh, the solution is to produce more oil. I mean, can you imagine the reaction? It will not be very positive, I think. So I think to develop this $1 trillion business, we need to work on having this separate business portfolio, which is sequestration in sandstone aquifers, where we have plenty of volume to do this. There's no doubt about that. And we need to learn how to do that rapidly. But the oil and gas industry, they are necessary to do that, because what is needed to do it? It is, you need pipelines, you need pumps, you need drilling holes, you need reservoir monitoring, all skills which is resides in the oil and gas industry. There's no other industry in the world which has comes even close to do what we are doing. So it seems to me there's a $1 trillion business waiting for us to grab it, and we should do it and not follow the example of IBM and said, okay, opportunity knocked 40 years ago. Hey, you want to be on the forefront of a $1 trillion business? And IBM in essence said, no, thanks, we are good. Thanks, we are good. We have everything under control. We are making money as we go. And so I hope the industry can learn to do new tricks. And I mean, it would be tremendous opportunity for the industry, for the membership of the professional societies, and of course for the world as a whole, because as we said, we are burning up right now, and we need to get CO2 underground in, say it again, 100 gigatons. I mean, right now the projects we have tens of projects, and they're putting in typically a couple of megatons a year. So the scale of what we need to do is really 100-fold. It's not trivial at all. It's a tremendous undertaking. But to get there, we need to promote it. The industry needs to promote it, and we need to do the work. And that is what the theme project is helping to do, hopefully.
Yeah, that's a perfect transition there. So, you've outlined sort of what carbon capture and sequestration is, and how it can help us move forward, and even kind of enticing the audience here with this creation of a $1 trillion business. And SEAM, that's SEG Advanced Modeling Corporation. You all are working on and it uses simulations. Why do you think something like SEAM, through a new SEAM CO2 storage project, would really be a good route to help address some of these challenges and help scale up what we need for carbon storage?
So that's a very good question that, of course, I love to talk about it. This is what I've been working on for the last a year with a group of fantastic volunteers working out the technical side of such a project. So why simulation? We have now, as I said, tens of field test projects to test the concept of sequestration, and it works all fine. But the scale up needed, as I mentioned before, we need to do this for one site a week eventually. And we cannot do this, all the monitoring which is needed, MVA, monitoring, verification, and accounting. We need to do this cheaply and accurately. And right now, we don't have a really clear concept or manual to do this efficiently. So again, we need like assembling line, like the T model in the Ford. We need to develop something along those lines. And the simulation, you can test the assumptions and can test the effectiveness of all different geophysical methods, which would be too expensive to do in real life in the field. So you have a reservoir, you do a model of the reservoir, and then you can test which geophysical measurements would be the most effective in your scenario to do what you need to do for assessment of the reservoir to begin with, and then for monitoring and verification and accounting, and to make sure that you have to avoid the dangers which are inherent with sequestration. Danger kind of it's not a real danger. The real danger to public perception would be seismic slip. Would never be catastrophic, but it could be nuisance, and that would be very bad for public perception of the whole process. So you need to learn how to pressurize a reservoir safely without seismic slip, and you need to learn how to do this. And that you can do with simulation, where you learn what are the seismic responses, the physical responses to your pressure increase. You simulate it, and you simulate what seismic detection methods can pick up on those, and how to pressurize the reservoir, how to let up on pressurizing, and so on. So it will make it cheaper, it will make it quicker to assess reservoirs. And that's what the SEAM project is hopefully developing methods to do exactly that.
And this, you and Bill Averill and others are working on developing the SEAM CO2 project, but it can be fun to kind of think about the grand vision for it. So if you would, please finish this sentence. If the SEAM CO2 storage project reaches its full potential for geophysics, it will
have developed the tools to rapidly assess potential storage sites, and has something of a manual for MVA, monitoring, verification, and accounting, using relatively cheap geophysical methods. That's about it in one sentence, what I hope will come out of it. And that will help then to move, if it goes there. There are political hurdles and so on, to the gigaton scale storage. But the learning how to do the simulation, I think, will be integral to it.
If a company wants to learn more about getting involved in this project, what is the best way to get started and to move forward on something like that?
They can go to the SEG website, look at the SEAM website, and Shelley Oakley, which is the administrative director for SEAM, she will handle all the question and send it to me and to Bill Averill, and happy to do that.
Well, that is great. This is the last question here. Josef, you mentioned you're retired. You're working on this SEAM project and consulting. What is, for someone in the field, just starting or been in the field a while, what is one piece of advice you would offer someone that would like to succeed as a geophysicist?
You need to be sure yourself, what do you want to do? Do you want to do hands-on research, or do you want to go more into operations and management? I think that's a decision for me. That was kind of a big question sometimes. So when I stayed most of the time in research, and I enjoyed it tremendously, and I never regretted it. But I've seen people who went into management and operations, but later regretted it because they really wanted to get their hands dirty on working on the mechanics of a code and develop code and so on. So I think to be happy, you have to know what are your strengths and what is it really what you would like to do.
That is great advice for anyone at any point in their career. I appreciate you sharing about this SEAM project. It's a really interesting article. It's the introduction to the leading edge, but it covers a lot more than just a special section. And we didn't even get into what this special section is about in the leading edge and the preview you provide for that. So people will definitely want to check that out. There's a lot of good information in there. So thank you for writing that article and for spending some time speaking with us today about your work.
Thank you very much. Happy to do it.
Thank you for listening to SEG's flagship podcast, Seismic Sound Off. SEG produces these episodes to benefit its members, the geophysics community, and inform the public on the value of the science. To show your support for the show, please share this episode with a friend, colleague, or manager that would enjoy hearing this show. Your recommendation is the single best action you can take on behalf of SEG's podcast. To receive the latest episodes first, follow Seismic Sound Off on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. Original music by Zach Bridges. This episode was hosted, edited, and produced by me, Andrew Gary at 51 Features. The SEG podcast team is Ted Bakamjian, Kathy Gamble, Allie McGinnis, and Mick Sweeney. Thank you for listening. This is Seismic Sound Off, signaling off.